Welcome everyone to the EVM61 podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Loja from the ETC Core team, and I'm here with some special guests from OpenRelay. We have Beth Van Horn, co-founder and COO, Austin Roberts, who's the technical co-founder and CEO, and Greg Lane, who's the CXO. And yeah, guys, so feel free to introduce yourselves and tell us more about all the cool things you're doing.
Austin, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm Austin Roberts, the technical co-founder and CEO at OpenRelay. I actually started OpenRelay just about 3 years ago this month. OpenRelay started out as an open source 0x relayer. If you're not familiar with 0x, it's a decentralized trading platform that uses off-chain order books. And we built the first open source relayer for 0x. While we were building OpenRelay, we kind of realized that one of the big gaps in the Ethereum space is that managing Ethereum node infrastructures can be quite challenging. You're talking about hundreds of gigabytes of data that you have to get from peers and validate that information as you pull it down. And there's a lot of technical challenges if you have a server die, and servers do die. It's a question of when, not a question of if. It can take days to recover that if you don't have a recent backup, and even if you do have a recent backup, it can still take a couple of hours to get back up and running. So we realized that in order for OpenRelay to work smoothly, we needed to have more reliable Ethereum node infrastructure. And decided that we were going to take a step back and look at how we could make Ethereum node infrastructure more reliable. So we actually took a page out of the databases playbook. So, something databases have been doing since the 1970s is called streaming replication, because databases have the same problems we're talking about. They have hundreds of gigabytes of data. They need high availability. They need to be able to scale up to deal with lots of demand. We looked to how databases have solved this same problem, and they use a technique called streaming replication. And what streaming replication does is, essentially have one node that's considered the authoritative source of the data, and then it streams that data out to other nodes that don't have to do all of the validation and stuff that the first node has to do. They can just have an extra copy of the data, serve read requests, and if something happens to the master, then the replicas can step into place and take over that role. So by the time we had built all of that, we had a highly available Ethereum node cluster that could handle about 2,400 requests per second, of which OpenRelay needed about 10 requests per second. So it was clearly overkill for a project like ours. And then the big downside to it, having extra capacity is no big deal except for the extra cost that it carries. So it was costing us about $1,500 a month to run that initial cluster, and then the rest of our node infrastructure was costing us low hundreds of dollars a month. So we elected to scale that cluster up a little bit, sell off our extra capacity, and now we're running Rivet, which is a cloud-hosted service. It's entirely self-service. You can sign up. Our pricing model is pretty simple. We give you 500,000 requests a month for free, and then beyond that, we charge $1 per 100,000 requests. And so, our goal in general is to, unlock the potential of developers. We're, both with our OpenRelay order book infrastructure, we started out with that. Our goal wasn't traders, it was developers who wanted to build applications that had something to do with trading. So, that gives, if a developer's building an application where, maybe they have their own token they want to sell, or maybe that's a conventional, conventional fungible token, or maybe that's something like CryptoKitties. When CryptoKitties came out, they had to invent their own trading platform first. And we thought it would be, really cool if the next CryptoKitties decided, hey, we're not going to bother building this trading platform. We're just going to use OpenRelay because they make it easy. And then with Rivet, similarly, we didn't want developers who were trying to build a stable coin or build a decentralized exchange aggregator or all sorts of these other really cool things that are being built in the Ethereum space. They didn't need to be worried about running node infrastructure. We just want them to focus on how to keep their stable coin stable or how to find the best deals for their customers on their DEX aggregator. We want to make sure that the Ethereum infrastructure just works so that they can focus on solving the problems that they need to solve. So recently we've added support for, we launched our Ethereum support, kind of a soft launch in July of last year, moving on to a full launch at the end of August of last year. And when was it? A couple of months ago, we added support for Ethereum Classic. So
yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, I think late June. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It was June that we added support for Ethereum Classic. So,
yeah.
And Ethereum Classic was fairly straightforward because it's also based on very similar Ethereum node infrastructure. It's a fork of the software that we normally use, but it was easy to adapt our changes for it.
Yep. And we also sort of got talk. By the way, Greg Lang, CXO here, lowercase x, and that's because I'm the generalist. I do everything from branding and marketing to outside sales to, well, a little bit outside sales. We do have somebody helping us with that who's not on this call, and legal as well because my background is in law. It's kind of pretty much my role. But I met Liz for the first time, I think, at ETH Berlin, maybe ETH Berlin or maybe ETH. I think it was ETH Berlin for the first time. That would have been 2019, and we started talking. I really thought ETC Labs was a bunch of cool folks, and the conversation sort of evolved from there. But that's me. That's my bit.
That's cool. And when I've actually played with the Rivet platform, and I personally love it. I know throughout the ecosystem too, and especially there's some people who just want to run nodes just to contribute more nodes to the network. But also because as someone who's helps coordinate a lot of stakeholders in Ethereum Classic and new users, I remember because right now a lot of nodes are transitioning to Korgoth and Hyperledger Besu, and it's amazing that some of the most popular cryptocurrency services, like brands that you might know, sometimes they're not aware of how to run some of these nodes. Because I remember I dealt with one person. They're like, hey, I'm using this flag, I'm running this node wrong. And of course you could probably boot your node right, but the infrastructure behind it is especially important, because if you need high assurance and you're running a service with a lot of customers and stuff, you need those services up and running. You can't it's not as simple as just running a node on a Raspberry Pi or something. And this one person I was going back and forth with at this one major service, I literally just sent them a link to hey, check out Rivet. They'll be able to help you, because it's fully managed, it's cost effective, and makes things simpler for so many teams.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that, and in terms of some of the technical challenges, like if you're just running one node, eventually you're going to have a problem and it's going to die. If you're running two nodes behind a load balancer, now you have a new problem of consistency. That if you have one request going to one server and another request, the next request goes to a different server, if they're both just regular nodes that are out there connecting to peers on the internet, they're going to get the blocks at different times. And so you could ask a question and find out that this is the current block number, and then ask that your next request goes to the other node, and you find out that the block number is the one before that. It hasn't gotten up to date, or worse, it's on the other side of a reorg that hasn't happened yet. And so you get different nodes behind the same service, offering you different, different, even conflicting information. And Rivet has gone out of our way to solve that problem. That we have, our streaming replication solution, we have multiple masters and multiple replicas, but they're all following the same feed. So all of our replicas are consistent with each other, typically within about 70 milliseconds. There are some outlier scenarios, but are essentially within 70 milliseconds, which, depending on where you are on the internet, is usually the round trip of a single request. So that if you run one request, get a response, and then add another request, the two nodes that handle those requests are going to be in sync in that amount of time. Whereas if you're just running, two nodes doing the peer-to-peer thing, you're going to get different answers some of the time, which isn't a big deal for some applications. It is a huge deal for other applications. So, it really is a hard problem to solve, of how do you make this a high availability service while still guaranteeing the consistency that some applications need. And we've managed to thread that needle, but it's not something that is going to be trivial for a regular application to solve. Like, it kind of started out at OpenRelay as a distraction for us, and then it became our core business. Not every project can do that.
And one of the things that Austin brings up is that really we have a very operational mindset here. We come from places, and we all worked together before we formed the company at different companies together. And we come from places where we had to support users that, with applications that simply could not fail. They had to have hundreds and millions of transactions and so on. And so each one of us brings that mindset of really doing this at enterprise scale and doing it right, so that we can really stand behind our production systems and be very proud of their availability and their reliability. And that is in great detail part of our ethos.
Absolutely. And beyond that too, like, especially folks who come to us from running their own nodes, they're not used to seeing the cost in, the pain and suffering that extracts from, the poor folks who are stuck with running the infrastructure and trying to focus on a product. Usually that's the same person at a new project, and they like, okay, thinking about the thing we actually want to do, and then switching gears to think about, holy crap, our Ethereum node's sick, or our ETC node is sick. Like, what do I do now? I guess I've got to stay up all night working on this, and then tomorrow it's yet another unfortunately derailed sprint, and our product's behind the timeline again. So it's really hard to run a business like that, I'd imagine. So it's a really cool thing to be able to do that and sort of free people's minds up to work on the thing that they actually cared about to begin with, and and take their eyes off the low level details.
That's true. I even had a because I also do have a lot of these like, particularly in Ethereum Classic service providers, and they're like, I know one of them was just they didn't want to manage their stuff anymore. They're like, do you have like a free endpoint? And I personally, like, good security sense, you don't use a free endpoint, you use your own node, or you have or your service provider. But even when you're doing your own node, like at scale, if you're going to be doing hundreds of requests a second, or it's still a lot for a node, and having that and you have to have that available infrastructure. And then in a lot of, and because you come from the enterprise space, I guess you kind of know, like, some of these, if you're going to have like or I guess you say a lot of crypto services, like if they're running their own, they're trying to run their own node, they probably have a stretched out department where it's hard for them to deal with like network events or what's going on with the software they're using.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which I don't know. Have you guys you don't have to say the name, but have you experienced anyone who had a really big issue with like maybe someone who was dealing with high volume that you definitely helped them out a lot?
Oh yeah, we've had a handful. We've had customers come to, one of the things that you mentioned is, if you're dealing with hundreds of requests per second, yeah, you need several nodes, but one of the challenges that you run into there is, if you're running a conventional Ethereum node and it's dealing with hundreds of requests per second, that hundreds of requests per second it's dealing with is time that it can't be processing blocks. So when you start getting up to that high of volumes, your blocks start falling behind, and you start getting blocks later and later than you should have. Again, with Rivet, we've set up the streaming replication system so that our replicas, we have what we call our masters, connecting to peers and validating blocks. They're not dealing with any requests whatsoever. They just take the blocks that they've validated and the state associated with it and drop it onto a topic that our replicas can pick up, and then they don't have to validate anything. They just write it out to disk, and then they're ready to serve the requests. So we can actually scale up to deal with a lot more requests without that increasing our block latency, where you would if you were dealing with conventional nodes. And so, yeah, we have dealt with some customers that had, very, very high request volumes, on the order of, hundreds of requests per second that, they were just at their wits' end trying to keep all of those nodes alive. And then, we really kind of take two angles with that. First is, if somebody that big is coming on board, we want to know when they're going to switch their services over so that we can scale up in advance and not rely on our autoscalers to deal with that extra load. So we scale up in advance. We figure out where their threshold is, and then we let our autoscalers scale it back down to whatever is the appropriate level for that volume, which is almost always fewer servers than they were using. But or at least the increase is fewer servers than they were using. Yeah, we have, we're able to deal with the request volume that our customers can throw at us, but we've also worked with a number of customers to drastically reduce their request volume. So, we had one customer who came in and they were using Ganache. I don't know if you're familiar with Ganache. It's a testing tool.
Right.
And they were using it to help predict how much gas several sequential transactions would use at the same time. So
Oh my gosh.
and in order to do that, the Ganache runs hundreds of requests against a conventional node in order to collect all of that information. We gave them one request that allowed them, because we run a modified version of Geth, we can extend it to support our customers. We gave them one request that lets them run multiple, do gas estimation for multiple consecutive requests, where the second request depends on the state changes of the first request and so on. And we were able to take something that was costing them hundreds of requests in order to do down to a single request that, rather than taking 7 seconds to come back, comes back in less than half a second. So we've been able to do some neat stuff. Neat stuff to help our customers reduce their overhead.
Right. And that's one of the things we love doing is working with the people that are building these projects and, really finding out what they care about and what they're trying to achieve. And then if we can do something cool, the way we see it, like if we can help them, there are a lot of different models in decentralized application land. but they are all trying to achieve similar goals. Like it's not that terribly much different wallet to wallet, for example, in terms of what they're trying, the service they're trying to provide. So if we can come up with some neat ways for one customer, we love working with them, and it also benefits everybody else that works with us. It's kind of a win-win, and that's also a really great way to just sort of build relationships and community and understand the nature of the services that we're really providing, which is taking the stress off developers and unlocking human creative potential.
Yeah, especially for developers, because sometimes you have a lot of developers where they could be like, oh, I'm like, who knows, maybe they're on like a netbook type of the, because you could build apps and with hardware that doesn't have like the memory and resources necessarily to write a node. Because there'll be a lot of people who are like, hey, I want to run a node, but maybe I don't have 500 gigabytes or a terabyte on my laptop. and then you have I would say,
or if they do have that much disk, it's magnetic, and it's not fast enough.
Yeah, and I've heard stories of people melting their external hard. They're like, they'll just like, oh, I could just plug this external drive in here, and then it just melts after a few months.
I'm pretty sure I did that to a Mac desktop early on. The disk started going pretty nasty after I tried to run a full node.
I also know one of our guys that earlier on too, they melted their MacBook. But it, like from because I've dealt with some developers where like they'll be good developers, they could build good software and stuff, but you have that divide where you have software developers who they take on dApp development, but then it's like, okay, but the node part, okay, now you're talking about infrastructure, and I guess you get more into the cloud services part and stuff too. So
Right.
That's where I think from a developer's perspective, things like Rivet are absolutely essential, especially because I use like your guys' pricing estimator too. It's like super reasonable compared to all the time to try to get the hardware and manage it yourself and stuff. And then even then it's like, okay, I'm going to have to deploy nodes and stuff, but it's like, okay, well, that's another rabbit hole of like, okay, what kind of operating system are you going to use? What kind of orchestration are you going to use?
And, and
setting file descriptors, setting system control limits. I mean, there's all sorts of things that go into tuning these things that until you've actually taken the time to, load test one of these nodes and actually do it, you don't know where the right place for those parameters is going to be.
Oh yeah. I mean, and a lot of people coming into this space are trained in the wonderful world of Web 2, right? So these folks aren't just trained to develop for the web world. They're also trained to think in terms of minimum viable product, because that's how we all lived our lives before. Everybody's trying to get funded so that they can keep doing the thing that they love instead of the thing that somebody else loves for a wage. And you come to this and you think, okay, we'll just go with the easy minimum solution now. But as it turns out, one of the key differences in blockchain is you have to pre-think your infrastructure a lot more carefully. And it's not so easy to just, once the usage goes up, quickly patch in something that will work. It's a lot more difficult to operationalize after you scale, I think, in blockchain. So I think that's where a service like ours can really add a lot to folks who are dreaming big, and everybody in the space is dreaming big. Nobody's thinking, a few of my friends will use this, and then it explodes. And they're thinking like, how can I change the world? If you're going to change the world, it has to be global scale someday. So.
Right, with relational databases, it's like, okay, I have this service here. Oh, I wasn't watching it. I kind of lost my cat pictures. But with cryptocurrency blockchain, it's like, hey, I just like literally skipped out on some funds, or my service isn't providing my customers. Like, you're dealing with real value, or I'd say more, or I'd say you're just blatantly dealing with money in a way.
Oh yeah. I mean, and if we ever hope for the world to be able to pick it up, then it has to be something that that they can trust as much as they can trust their banker, their broker, their middleman, right? It has to be better than that if it's going to be worth the upgrade. And it can't be infrastructure on my laptop that's melting in that case.
Right, that's true. And there's this idea, especially when it comes to like diehard, I could say like those diehard anarcho crypto people, where they'll be like, "Oh, you have to run your node and stuff." But for most people, it'd be like, if you like don't know what you're doing, don't do it. It's like running any P2P system. There's a lot of security behind everything, and that's why
Well,
like I've been
and,
recommending.
and you know, we kind of started out from that angle of wanting to run our own nodes and wanting to like Rivet is based on an open source project that we started, right? So our goal initially was let's make something operationally manageable Ethereum that is accessible to anybody. And we've got CloudFormation templates and stuff that you can go up and set up your own cluster that's a highly available cluster that's pretty easy to manage, and you don't have to rely on us. Now, we're not going to give you the part where we limit our customers and how we charge them. We'll give you what you need to not need us, but we're not going to give you what you need to compete with us. But the larger point is we started off wanting to build this so that anybody could run it, and it just the economics didn't work out that way. That when like if Rivet charged OpenRelay for requests the same way we charge everyone else, we would charge ourselves about $60 a month. And for what the infrastructure actually costs to run, it doesn't make any sense to pay thousands of dollars a month to have this highly available infrastructure when you can pay somebody else $60 a month to run it for you. And there's still a strong part of me, even though it competes with my business interests now. There's still a strong part of me that wishes that running highly available Ethereum infrastructure was something that could be done for $60 a month, but it's just not.
Yep.
And I guess generally transactions like on network too. I would say more people are more conservative about that before they start paying transaction fees and stuff. So even though there's plenty of transactions that happen, but as far as when people are going to, like when I see someone, they complain, "Oh, it costs me money to try to run my own node and stuff." It's like, yeah, okay, well, like why don't you?
You got to think about your time too.
Yeah, like why don't you just use a service that's charging you for just the utilization? And that's why,
Right.
and that's where I see Rivet making total economic sense for the small guy to the big guy.
Yep. Well, and we even have a rebuttal for the crypto anarchists who think that services like ours are begging for a future that's just Bezos Part 2 running AWS, and all it'll take is a court order to one company to shut everybody down. Well, the risk that they're trying to forestall is a future one, right? They're worried that one person is going to control enough to execute their own civil attack if they want, right? Like they could come after the whole network if they decided to go malicious. Well, we're serving from replicas, right? Like our masters do not need to grow at the same rate. Like we're not dominating a huge portion of the network at a one-to-one rate when we add customers. So yeah, we hope people run their own nodes. We're just there for the folks who can't or have businesses where they need to provide a certain level of guarantee to the people that use their service. I love the crypto anarchists. I kind of am one, but at the same time, you have to be pragmatic if you want this thing to be something everybody can use. Like grandma too.
Right.
Someday.
And when it comes to the just like app space, software space and stuff. Like you have a lot of people building apps and stuff. When it comes to like the infrastructure part, I would say that's like a much smaller clan within the tech space. Like there's not that many people. So I would say for most people, things like Rivet and other services are they or I guess say they help a huge surplus of people who need that service.
Absolutely. In fact, having hired in the IT space for an awful long time, a great DevOps engineer is, unbelievably hard to come by, right? I mean, that skill set, especially with the cloud services and, the automation of the processes and so on, that makes things reproducible for us. That's a skill that not every developer walks in the door with, and certainly one that's hard to find, even if you're building your own small firm in this space. Just hiring the right people that could do this work to set it up and make it truly operational for you is very hard to come by. So that's part of the reason why we're happy to provide this service, because we've got several of them and we like them.
That's awesome. I think
it's too bad Sam couldn't be here.
I think we're reaching time now. However, I want to thank you guys for coming on. If you could just tell us, like people who want to learn more about OpenRelay, Rivet, and all the other things that you guys are doing, where can they find that stuff?
We've got our website. You can go to openrelay.xyz if you want to learn about our broader perspective. We do, like Austin mentioned early on, we do the decentralized exchange infrastructure still. That's not running on ETC at the moment. Though if somebody were to build a 0x analog, we could probably give them a relayer backend. And then there's also rivet.cloud. That's for the node infrastructure service that we've been talking about mostly here. And that'll give you all the details. And it has links to the GitHub and all the open source stuff, goodies at the bottom. Just, look for the little GitHub guy and you're good to go. And then you can also find us on Twitter at either @open_relay or @rivet. If you just search Rivet, it comes up, but it's Rivet with capital lettering and underscores between every letter, because somebody already had Rivet when we created it. So definitely come check us out. If you're talking to us on social media, you're talking to me. So I'm happy to banter with you and make our brands be fun and amusing. So feel free to engage with us.
Sweet. And we'll put those links in the description for people who are listening. And I appreciate the OpenRelay team for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen.